Hi, I'm Andrew with Flair, and I want to thank you guys for first picking up a Flair and trusting us with your espresso, but also for taking time out today. It's a Saturday, it's a weekend, so we appreciate you putting some time into that. It shows that you're dedicated to a good result, and that's what we're here for. Some people have experience with other espresso machines, but manual espresso brewing is going to be a little bit different because we're in control of everything. That's a good thing, and it could be a bad thing, right? Because if you're not on top of it, if you're not, what I call brewing intentionally, if you're not focused on everything you're doing here, it could be, either way. Now, if you like to drink lattes, cappuccinos, that kind of thing, it's a little bit less important. But if you enjoy your espresso neat or straight, then of course it matters a little bit more to have everything just dialed in right, because you can't hide it with sugar and milk. And you'll really taste that espresso, which is a good thing. Hopefully taste the origin, hopefully taste the characteristics of the roast and the way it was meant to be, and not necessarily a poor extraction, too sour, too bitter, that kind of thing. Let me get one more person in here. I think they're in. And after a while, we're just going to have to go with whoever's here. So again, thanks again. I'm Andrew with Flair. I head up the support service, do some product development, testing, that kind of thing. Also, if you follow us on socials, Facebook, Instagram, it's either myself or Abby you'll be talking to. Abby's also helping me out in support and service, as well as Virgil. So if you guys ever have any issues, questions, feedback, that kind of thing, we love to just hear from you, telling us what you do like, what you don't like, improvements. I mean, if you've been following Flair long enough, you'll see that we're listening to what you're saying, to the feedback. There's been a lot of changes, small iterations, sometimes imperceptible to the customers, sometimes not, that we will make as we receive feedback. So if you have anything like that, please share it with us. We're always interested to improve the product and design new products. We're always kind of working on new things as well. We're going to ask that we have our mics muted for this portion of the video, just so that we can make sure that the focus is on me and we don't have any background noise going on. So please make sure, go ahead and leave your mics muted. What we'll end up doing is at the end of the demonstration, I'll go through and hopefully there's nothing to point out. There's a chat feature. If you're not familiar with Zoom, there's a chat feature and a poll feature. I'm launching the first poll right here. If you could take some moment while I'm still talking, yammering on, to fill out the poll. It helps me know more about like where you're coming from, what your grinder is, what you're hoping to get out of the class, that sort of thing. Helps us. Sometimes I have some time to look in there now and see what I can hit on for this, but also for any future classes, it gives me a little bit more insight to what to do. So we've got the poll going. Also, there's a chat feature. So as questions come up through the demonstration while I'm talking, put them in there or just kind of hold on to them in your head. And then at the end of my demonstration and saying what I wanted to say today, I'll just go through and see what kind of questions I find in chat and give you a chance to unmute and ask away. But again, in the meantime, just go ahead, please leave your mics muted until we get to the Q&A phase. All right, well, we are 5 minutes in. I guess if you're not here, you're not getting in. So we'll go ahead and kind of move on to that. So today I'm going to brew with the Pro. I realize that some of you might have a signature or classic, but the majority of people taking these classes are buying the Pro. And for that reason, I'm going to brew with that just to hopefully hit on more relevant information. But honestly, they haven't changed a lot between this one and the, say, behind me, you can see the classic. And the signature would have the gauge as well. So really all we're talking about is a difference in the amount of coffee you can use and the amount of water you can use. Now, if you have a classic, you don't have a gauge, but there's tricks to figure out about how much force you're using and then translate that to pressure, and we can talk about that later once I see if there's anybody with a classic in here or not. If you have a signature or the Pro, then you have the gauge. So I'm going to talk mostly about pressure and what you see on the gauge when we're working with it. So what I like to do is I like to start with just going right into a demonstration. That way you can see what I do, and then you can ask relevant questions on that. And then afterwards, we can go through things little by little. So the important part, this is a big chunk of metal. If you have a Pro, this is also as well. There's a lot of thermal mass here. It's important that these are also to the temperature that you want to brew at, because if they're not, when you add that hot water to brew, it's quickly going to get sucked out by the metal. So do make sure, especially with the Pro, you might consider to heat this as well. If you have a classic or a signature, it's not necessary. There's a lot less metal there, and plastic is a good insulator, so you don't necessarily need to do that there. But I like to do it for my Pro. But definitely this, regardless of what you have, make sure you get this up to temperature. There's a couple ways to do that. Of course, if you have the Pro, we sent you out a preheat cap, but I don't use this at all, and I'll tell you why. Basically, it's going to take you at least 3 fills and dumps, 45 seconds of letting that water heat up that metal before you can actually get this up to a temperature that I would say you can brew a light roast or a medium. Now, if you're brewing a dark roast, that's not as important because in generally dark roasts can be better with lower temperatures, so you can get away with that. But if you like a light roast or a medium, I would suggest that you don't use a preheat cap even if you have it, and do some of the other things I'm about to show you. So the first thing I like to do is I like to get this going while I'm working and prepping out my basket, my coffee, that kind of thing. Now, hopefully you have a kettle. If you don't, it's a good thing to get, in particular because this spout right here gives you a lot of control when you're filling up, so you don't have a lot of splashing and mess and water dripping down. So having like precise control as you're filling up. But the other nice thing about a kettle is we have holes right here. So what I like to do is I like to place it on top like that. I turn this on, and while that's getting my water ready to boil or to brew, I'm also steaming that and getting that up to temperature. Now, do keep in mind, you'll have to set your kettle to boil in order to get the steam to come out. So if you just set it to some temperature below boiling, it won't ever happen. I live in the mountains. I have to boil, otherwise I won't even get up to a respectable temperature. The highest I can brew here is 92 degrees, 92.5. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But even for you, I would suggest if you haven't done that already, if you're having issues, say already with under extraction, like sour, maybe too much acidity, you're going to want to just try to use water right off boil. It cuts out the temperature part of it, at least, because there's so many variables to your espresso, coffee in general. But temperature is one of those things that you have some control over if you take it, but you have to be focused on it, because as that water gets up to temperature and I take it off the heat source, it's going to keep dropping. As I add that water to other things that have thermal mass, it's going to keep pulling energy out. So just use water off boil. It's the best way to rule out the temperature issue. I preheat with that water off boil, but I also brew with it off boil. And I would do that even if I was at a lower elevation. Just gives you a little bit more breathing room. I'd rather catch the temperature on the way into the range that I'd like, rather than try to heat right to that temperature and run around trying to catch it. So do that, and then it only takes you 1 or 2 times with a thermal pin or something to figure out how much time after the water's been taken off the heat source boiling that it will drop into where you're looking for. So that is one way to do it. There's even a better way. I take the cap off. This is a silicone funnel that you can get off Amazon. Now, if you have a Stag or I have a Stag upstairs, but if you have a Stag kettle from Fellow, you're going to want like a 3.5. And if you have a Barista or a Bonavita, the 3-inch works well. These are food safe and up to temperatures well above where you're going to use. So now I can put this a little bit deeper into the kettle. And in some cases, your vents may not make it easy, or maybe this knob is too big for you to get a cylinder to prop up on that. So that's why this alleviates that. You can kind of get that right into it. So I'm boiling, letting that go, and now I'm going to get over to the coffee. Hopefully you guys are weighing out everything. I like to weigh out the dry coffee in. I like to weigh out the beverage out. And the reason being is a few grams plus or minus each time you go to pull a shot will make a huge difference in your espresso. And so keeping that consistent from shot to shot is going to help you, once you get a good result, keep that. As opposed to oh, this was a great shot, but yesterday's was not so good. A lot of that might just be because you're not tracking variables like temperature, weight, that kind of thing. The other thing to keep in mind is not just about how much goes in, but how much comes out. If I pull that shot all the way to the lever comes to the bottom, it's going to taste a lot differently than if I were to say stop that shot somewhere in between, which is how I like to brew. And so just the flavors of the coffee, even if everything else was the same, if you just keep pulling that shot, running more water through it, spending more time in the extraction, the flavors are going to be different. I'm going to use 16 grams today. I'm going to use the Flair grinder. This is our Flair Royal. If you have any questions, I'll tell you about that later. Oh, and I forgot a cap, sorry. Be right back. All right, let me get my cap on there. I like hand grinders for a couple reasons. For one, I love the smell of the coffee as it's coming through just underneath my nose. But also, a lot of grinders out there tend to retain and hold on to coffee, so that when I'm brewing a shot today, I'm probably using a couple grams from yesterday, because it basically is constantly pushing out some of the coffee that you had ground out the last time you used your grinder. Whereas the hand grinders, you pretty much have access to everything. You can see what's sort of left behind or maybe stuck in the catch cup or just around the burrs, and you can kind of knock it all out. So I feel like you're getting a fresher cup every time. That's another reason. But also, you get a much bigger bang for the buck with a hand grinder than you would with an electric. Electrics are, at least $100, $150 more money, if not more, depending on the whistles and bells they come with when it comes to the same quality. So definitely, if you haven't already got a grinder or you're looking for a grinder, give a look to hand grinders. If you get a decent hand grinder, something that's at least 150 to 200, 225, they're going to be great for espresso. You're going to have a good quality grind out of that. Whereas if I was going to buy an electric, I might be spending anywhere between $350 and $700 for a really good electric grinder. Espresso is a lot more finicky than any other brew method. So it's unfortunate, but if you're into espresso and you love it and you want to really do it well, you have to spend a little bit more money. Generally speaking, you're going to have a better grinder for espresso than you can get away with other brew methods. So one of the grinders that a lot of customers have is the Encore by Barista, or the Virtuoso is a slightly better version, but not really, in the sense that they only have 40 clicks. And for espresso, I highly recommend that you use more than 40 clicks. Look for something with a minimum of 60. And the clicks basically get you into the target grind that you want, because you might find on your grinder, if you have 20 or 30 clicks, that maybe what you want is somewhere in between two numbers. So if it's, the one indent is number 4 and the other indent is number 5, you might feel like, man, if I could just get it right in between those two, it's going to come out a lot better. And that is the problem with most of the budget grinders. They don't have quite the resolution. All right. So the important thing about your grinds is that you have it even in the basket. Now, you can kind of see that it's laying pretty flat already for me. And that's the other nice thing about a hand grinder, is generally speaking with hand grinders, you get less clumping going on as well. So I don't necessarily need it, but I do recommend something like a distributor. This is acupuncture needles that I trimmed off, but guitar strings is a piece of cord. It costs next to nothing. But if you have a lot of clumping issues and you're having problems getting the coffee to spread evenly across your basket, you can get one of these and just kind of rake your coffee around a little bit. The thinner these wires, the better. You just want to help the coffee. You don't want to push it around. Some of the distributors out there, pretty stiff wires, and they have kind of shovel ends. And I don't believe that those are doing you any favors. They're just probably making things worse. So once I've got the coffee spread across there a little bit better, I'll give it just a little bit of a tap, especially if your dose is high enough that it's filling into your funnel area. You need to make sure the coffee gets down. Otherwise, when you remove the funnel, it will go everywhere. Or I could just tamp with the funnel on. The next question we get a lot of is how much tamp force to use. I recommend not using that much tamp force, in part because I feel like you can have more control when you're not bearing down on it with all of your weight, from your wrist to your forearm to your shoulder. So what I like to do is just place it down and just use my fingers to come down. I know this doesn't look necessarily straight on. It needs to be over there somewhere because of the camera, but I am going straight down. And what I like about doing this with my fingers is I have a nice top-down view of whether or not I'm straight. Believe it or not, it is very easy to have this turned off to the side, especially when it's underneath your palm like that. So this allows me to make sure I'm getting a straighter tamp, because really it's not so much the tamp force, but using the same tamp force every time and having a nice straight, flat, I should say, level tamp than it is to come in with a lot of force. We're just compressing the grounds to the point where we don't have air pockets going on. And you can see it's a nice level tamp, I think. Don't know what the video quality is here for you guys. When it comes to the screen, if you have a Pro, you might notice it looks a little bigger on the holes on the one side and smaller, but this is just manufacturing process. So you can flip a coin and whatever side lands, it doesn't really matter. But it is important to get it in there straight. My little hack or trick is to slide it across the top like this and drop it in, and it just goes in nice and flat. If you've been trying to like drop it from a distance or a height, it can sometimes get a little bit crooked. If you have a signature or the classic, it rests on top, so you don't have any worries about that. But if you have a Pro, that's how I recommend doing it. All right, so next step is load it into place. And I already have this preheating and ready to go. I'm going to place that there. Boiling water. Now you might see I have a scale hiding out down there. I like to, again, weigh it on the way out. I can recommend some scales to you here later. The one that I showed you earlier will work as well. You see that I filled it all the way into the well. I want to make sure that I only fill with water and don't leave any air behind. As I push this in, I might get a little bit of water over the top. It's not a big deal. It's more important to fill it in with water. Let me get that glare off for you. There you go. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a pre-infusion. And I'm going to try to get you a view. There you go. Start with the pre-infusion. And I'm going to try to watch the bottom of my basket and make sure that I get some water into the coffee bed a little bit before I start the shot. We'll talk about pre-infusion later, but this is just what I do. Again, anything I show you today is what I like to do, but you don't need to. So you can see that some coffee showed up a little bit around the rim, and I am just going to give that a few more seconds. And I'm going to pull into pressure. And I'm just going to hold it there. And I'm just leaning in with my body. I'm trying to stay away from the camera though for you. You can see I'm also not worried about getting to 9 bar. We'll talk about that later as well. I'm just trying to get a nice, good extraction, which I tend to do that mostly around 6 to 7 bars. And it's hard for you to see the time, but I'm watching my time. I'm watching my weight because sometimes I cut the shot shorter or run it longer based on how I deem where it's running, if I need to speed it up or slow it down. Now, when I get it to the point where I'm happy, so I pulled that out to 32 grams in about 40 seconds. I'm going to swap. This is the only time I use my preheat cap to catch some drips while I work on that. And you can see a nice crema there. I'll show you the shot there. So you can see that I have volume here. And this is helpful to some extent, but not so much because the crema will be different for every coffee that you brew. And so if I'm trying to stop by volume, I'm never going to be that accurate, whereas the weight's always going to be the same, crema or not. So I recommend that you brew by weight with a scale as opposed to just eyeballing it and figuring out what you're going. So that's 32 grams there. The other treat for you today, I'm going to try to make a latte. I know that a lot of people don't drink their espresso neat. They want to put it in milk or something. And a lot of people, the first question we get is, well, how am I going to steam my milk, or how am I going to make a latte or a cappuccino? Well, this is one way to do it. This is a modified French press. These are sold on Amazon. It's just slightly different than a French press. This is like kind of a mesh screen plastic. So you can find these pretty cheap, or you can use your French press if you already have one. And I will do my best to make a little bit of latte art today, but I'm not a latte pro, so don't expect miracles from me. And I've already preheated the milk, and so you can put this in your microwave. On mine, it's about 45 seconds, 50 seconds that I'm going to heat that up. You don't want to overheat it. So I have a little thermometer here that tells me where I'm at. You could use a pen or something, but if you overheat your milk, it's just going to not work out. You want to keep it below 60, about 60 degrees Celsius, about 150-ish, 50-something Fahrenheit. And that helps for the texturing, the steaming, but of course also for the flavors and the taste. So if you do a French press like I'm going to do today, I'm still learning this as well to get the best. And if you just want a cappuccino, you just go at it and just make as much foam as you can. If you want a latte, you don't want as much foam, so you're going to, probably go a little bit more reserved. But if you want, say, like I'm going to try a latte art, you're going to need to texture that, put a little bit of weight and body into it, but not so much that you get it over foamy. So what I've been finding working for me is a lot of fast, vigorous pulls up and down like this, just pulling it just above the surface of the milk. And I'm trying to aerate it, try to get that milk to expand. And so I'll do that maybe 30, 40 pulls up and down, real fast and vigorous. And then when I feel like I've got the milk stretched well enough, then I'll do another 40, 50 deeper all the way through the milk to try to incorporate those levels and make them a little bit smaller, because obviously, again, if they're too big, not going to be so good. All right, so I think we're there. So now I'm going to do those deeper strokes through the milk like that, and they don't have to be as fast. We're just trying to get those bubbles throughout the milk. And again, you know, so for someone who likes a latte or cappuccino, you can heat this up in the microwave. You can heat this up in a pot, and then you have this really inexpensive way to make it. I also really enjoy steamers, stovetop steamers, and I can tell you some examples of those as well. They're a lot easier to control the texturing, and that's how I normally do it. But for the sake of for the class and for people that are new to it and, you know, maybe not sure if that's something they want to do, I wanted to give you an alternative that was inexpensive and accessible. So that's what we're showing here today. And I think that should do it. And I recommend this. They give you a little spout here that you could pour with, I guess, but I don't think that's going to be too accurate. So I'd get a pitcher that is going to do a better job of it. And then you get your latte out. Also, regardless of how you like to drink it, make sure you incorporate that espresso. It's a stratified beverage. So if you just started sipping that, you're going to find that the heavier parts of that espresso is down at the bottom. And it's going to taste differently as you get through. I don't know if this is a really good texture, but we'll give it a shot anyways. And just make it simple with your French press. Just, again, not a latte artist, but hey, you know, if you were putting that out in front of a partner, they'd be stoked to have something, right? So as I mentioned before, if you aren't going to drink it, if you're going to drink it neat, always go ahead and pour it into something else or stir it with a spoon, just so that you know that you're getting the same flavors throughout, and incorporate that espresso, because it does come out stratified. On that note, it's a good thing to do once or twice, just to kind of remind yourself of what you like with an espresso and decide how long to pull it in the brew ratios that I was talking about before, is to see how that espresso is tasting as it's coming out. So enlist a friend, and then you can have them like pull that glass out and replace it with another one as you continue to pull that shot, and say do that 4 times, so that you split the espresso, maybe 4 different cups, and taste the difference from cup to cup to cup. And then you realize what we're really drinking is kind of a blend of things we like and things we don't like, to try to find this balance of flavors. Most people wouldn't like the end shot, just the last runny part of that shot. And most people would be pretty repulsed with just that first 10 grams as well. So it's good to sort of blend and mix. But that tells you how long I should pull that shot. What I did earlier, like I told you, is I started with 16 in and I pulled to 32 out. So that's a 1-to-2 brew ratio. That's 16 grams of coffee to 32 out. And if I wanted to go to a longer shot, say 1-to-3, 3 times 16, and you can pull that shot as long as, I think, about 58, 56 grams, depending on what you're using as far as coffee, because all the coffee will affect how much it absorbs the water, that kind of thing. But knowing what you like and then hitting that every time will make sure that you're getting consistent results. Espresso is all about consistency, and it's really easy to change one thing or another without realizing it and have a completely different result. And people are constantly kind of chasing a tail, trying to figure out what was different and why they can't get the same flavors that they did that one time. There's that thing called the God shot, and the reason why I think there's so much mystique around like that perfect shot is it's hard to nail it for everybody, no matter who you are. And I should have a little bit of that wet whistle. I would have normally tested that out just to make sure. I forgot to, I was kind of focused on the presentation, but I would have tested that out to see how that espresso tasted, to know, to inform myself for the next shot, what I should do differently per se. But I think with my times being about right and me knowing that coffee and watching it, and that's what that mirror is good for as well, as watching it, I know that that came out pretty good. Mirrors are really helpful because it's more, some people will analyze the puck after they pull it out to see if there's any issues with the puck. I look more at the bottom of the filter to see whether or not I'm having issues. If you look back there and you see it's coming out real dark on one side of your filter and really light on the other, it's telling me that I'm pushing more water through one section of the puck than the other. So I'm not really fully extracting that bed, not evenly as well. And so it's probably not going to taste that good. So if I see a nice even extraction, coffee colors are looking good in all different sides of that basket, I'm probably getting a good pull. So a mirror is really helpful. Otherwise, you're like down here trying to see it while you pull it like a caveman. It's a little bit awkward. Mirrors are really easy. They're cheap. Most of you probably can borrow one from a partner if you don't have one yourself. And this will give you more information about your extraction. All right, I'm going to run through a few more of the espresso theory things I wanted to mention out here before we move into Q&A, and then also frequently asked questions. When it comes to brewing, you've got time, temperature, and pressure. These are your three major things that are going to sway that extraction. So the time is only controlled if you can control your grind. You have to be able to slow the flow of the water through the coffee bed. If you can't do that, you're not going to build any pressure at all. But of course, you can slow it so much that you're not even pulling that shot. You're not extracting, you're choking. So you have to dial in the grind to control the time, also pressure. Temperature is important. Like I said, just start using water right off boil right now. Make sure that you know that you're bringing in as much energy as you can to the extraction. If you've ever thrown a tea bag into a cold cup of water and watch, you can sit there all day and it won't ever extract. It won't get darker because you don't have enough energy. You don't have enough heat going into that. So start with water off boil, catch it on the way down. Pressure. Now, you saw me, I did a little bit of a pre-infusion first, and then I slowly ramped into my top end pressure and even let it go a little bit, kind of slowly ramping back. And then I slowly ramped off to cut the shot. That's pressure profile. And I'm deciding how much pressure and when. This is something that is unique to a manual espresso machine like the Flair. Most espresso machines don't give you these kind of controls, but they're good and they're bad, right? So you have to be in control of that. You have to understand what you're doing when you're adding more pressure or less pressure. But the pressure will absolutely make a big difference. I could take the same grind, the same temperature, the same puck prep, everything, and I can choke that shot by just going really hard and fast to 9 bars, or I can get a nice, good extraction like I did in the way that I pressure profiled it. So you can take a grind that is a little bit coarser and still get the same shot as a grind that's a little bit finer in terms of time and weight by just controlling the pressure, pre-infusion, these sort of things. So pressure, temperature, and time, these are real important. But there's other variables such as your water. A lot of people are not aware how important the water is. Third wave water is probably the easiest thing for me to recommend for you. If you've never tried it, you want to play with it, experiment. You can make your own water as well. But you get some deionized water, 1 gallon, you drop that in, and you'll have water that is close to the specs of the SCA, the governing body for specialty coffee. And that is where you're going to get the best results because what's in the water will affect what comes out of your coffee. You need to have certain amount of materials to have better extractions, more extraction, but also if you are someone who says, oh, it's a little bit too much acidity for me or might be confused with sourness, having a little buffer in the water will help you enjoy espresso when you're using a light or medium roast or a very lively coffee. Conversely, if you like that acidity and you have too much buffer in your water because you're not controlling it, you don't know what it is, you might be missing out on the flavor notes that you're looking for. So water is extremely important. Make sure that you know that that's not the variable that you haven't played with and you don't know that that's the thing that's affecting your extractions. Homogeneity of the grind. So having a good grinder is really important. It's not like a chef that's cutting up perfectly cubed coffee. Every grinder will throw off some powder, some bigger boulders are what we call them, and also more of like the target that you're looking for. The better the grinder, the closer you're going to hone in on the target and the less of this stuff that you're going to have. There's always going to be some fines. There's always going to be some boulders. It's more of like a distribution. A distribution could be like most of it falling in the peak, like a mountain, but it could also be like a molehill, or it could be, undulating hills, rolling hills. So your grinder will play a huge thing there. It can be the reason why you're suffering channels. We'll talk about channels in a minute, and not getting good extractions because you have maybe too much powder, too many fines. So the better the grinder, the better the shots are going to be. You're going to extract more evenly because the powder, the fines, are going to extract a lot faster, like instantaneously, compared to the boulders, the bigger, because the water needs to get in and then get back out. It takes time to do that. So you're going to have this really mix of extractions going on. So the closer you can get to your target, the better your extraction, the more even. And then, of course, like we mentioned before, the resolution, right? So if you can't get into where you need to get, then you're never really going to have that perfect shot. You're going to have to play with dose and other things and pressure profiling to try to slow that shot down or speed it up as you need. It's good to grind as fine as you can, but not too fine. You can grind too fine and actually cause issues. Like if I was looking at that mirror and I saw a lot of metal, I'll show you how to clean that up in a minute, but if you see a lot of metal still showing while you're pulling coffee out, that means that you're choking or blocking certain parts of that coffee bed. So grinding too fine can be the thing that's causing that to happen. So you're basically only extracting part of that coffee, and you're probably over extracting it because you're running more water through areas that have nothing left to give but bitterness and acrid flavors and tastes that are not very pleasant. But again, grinding finer is typically better. If you're dealing with sprays or spurts on a bottomless, for one, when you go to dial in on the signature, you also have one of these in the classic. Use your spout first to make sure you get dialed into the area, because if you don't and it's rushing out or you're channeling, you're going to get messy. So while you're first dialing in, I recommend the spout. And once you get to the time and the weight that you're looking for and you feel like the shot tastes good, it's probably coming out nice and no longer like channeling and spraying and spurting. Then you can remove that up and start paying more attention to how it's extracting out. Ratios and recipes. So the ratio would be, like I said, 16 grams in, 32 out. The recipe starts to add in other information, say like the temperature that I was using to brew at. The preheat is a huge part of that too. The pressure that I use, all these other little variables go into the recipe. If you want to start sharing information and get feedback from people, or you had an amazing cup of coffee and you want to recommend that coffee, also make sure to tell them how much dry coffee you used, how coarse possibly, if you can share that information, did you grind it, and how much of a yield did you get, how much beverage did you get, temperature. All these things are real important. Otherwise, they can have the same coffee, same grinder, same machine, and they won't necessarily get the same flavors that you do. Lighter roasts require more energy, so if you're someone who likes lighter, medium roast, make sure that you're, again, coming in with as much heat and you're preheating as well as you can. Darker roast, you can be a little bit sloppy, if we can put that into words, or just don't have to worry about it. Like I said, it's probably better that you're not coming in with too much temperature. One thing that I didn't really go into that I wanted to go through with you is how to clean up. So first things first, you can see that I didn't pull that shot all the way through. At this point, I could stick a cup through like this underneath, and I can just keep pulling that shot to get whatever's left in there. That would be one way to do it. What I wanted to show you is the way that I usually clean up. I just pull that off and then dump the water out. There's always going to be some residual water, especially if your coffee sits below the level of the rim, because the plunger that's in there that's pushing the water through the coffee bed doesn't go into the portafilter, more than like a 1 millimeter or so. So you can see I have a little bit of standing water there because my coffee bed is down here and the rim is up here. So I'm never going to get all that water out. If you were to be brewing for somebody else in the house, you're going to want to know like a quick way to brew a second cup. There's a couple things to do. You can buy a second one of these. That's the easiest, to be honest. I'm not just trying to get your money. I'm telling you, the easiest way to deal with it is have another one of these, have it prepped and ready to go. And then this will be nice and hot from that one shot. I just slide it onto a prep basket and fill it up and go. There is one step, though, that you're going to want to know. This is a dosing cup, also a tamper. If you're trying to travel light and you don't want to bring the stainless steel, it works. But it's also the way that you reset the Pro or push out your pistons on a Classic. Get that back to the top so I'm not sticking my fingers in hot metal and touching it. Just use that to slide it back. So then again, if I had another shot ready to go, I prep it, put it on, and then go. Everything's nice and hot. I probably don't have to preheat again. If you only have one, this is what I'd recommend, is get that off. Clean that out. And I wouldn't go bonkers on cleaning this out, and I wouldn't run it under cold water because I like the fact that it's warm or hot from that last shot. So I'll just take a rag or a towel and just get the moisture and the wet coffee out of there and then prep it again. So then I can just go ahead and throw the coffee that I already had ground from that first shot ready to go, put it in and prep it and go. Again, don't run this under cold water because it's already nice and hot and ready to go, and you like that. You like to have that extra temperature. All right, get that out of the way. And then, of course, just want to give that a wipe. Keep in mind, if this is still wet and moist from that last shot, you're going to have issues with your extraction. As soon as you start to put dry coffee in there, it will start to cake and do some funny things in just that part of the puck. So make sure it's nice and dry before you go. All right, real quick, I'm going to go through the frequently asked questions. These are the things that we'll get in a lot to service to somebody that's new to the system and they're unclear of what's going on. So let me get that back here to give you some examples. And I have a gauge. And I'll move that. Don't need that anymore. All right, so one of the things we'll get often is, I've been pulling the shots, I've been using the same coffee, I haven't changed the thing, and suddenly the pressure is falling, I've got a leak of pressure, a loss of pressure, something's going on. Generally speaking, if you don't see water coming from some other part of the system other than here, which would be dark and coffee, if you don't see water coming from here or maybe here where we have O-rings, it's not a pressure loss in the system per se, you just haven't created the amount of back pressure you need with the coffee bed. So believe it or not, you can't set it and forget it. You can't just find that magical number on your grinder and leave it that way for every coffee, even the same coffee. It will change. You will have to dial in moisture, humidity, atmospherics, things like that will affect it. The way you pulled that shot, like I mentioned before, the pressure profiling could have changed. So if you're not seeing clear water coming out, you don't have a leak. It is going to be just the fact that you need to grind finer for that coffee. Work on your puck prep, that kind of thing. If you did have a leak, it's most likely going to come right where that gauge is. Keep in mind, you need to snug up your gauge. So if I had this backed off this far, basically I'm going to have water leaking out of there because I haven't seated the gauge onto the O-ring that's inside there. So you have to make sure that this is snug. Just go until you feel it, stop right there, and then you can back it up a 3/4, half turn, no more than 1 whole turn. And then I will be able to still see that and I won't be leaking. So that's generally when that happens if you're seeing things changing a little bit on you. What else? So sprays and spurts, we talked a little bit about that. Generally speaking, that's when you're channeling. Channeling means you've basically had something open up in your coffee bed and the water's going right through, sort of like a fissure or crack, jetting through some holes. Same thing as if you put your thumb over a garden hose, you can see that water velocity changes and it sprays and goes out in different directions and fast. That's what's happening here. So working on your puck prep will improve that. But also if you're grinding too coarse, and you're not creating the back pressure in the system and allowing the water to evenly saturate the bed and come through as it's supposed to, coalescing into one single stream, then you need to grind finer for that. You can, again, work on your puck prep, but use a spout until you get that dialed in. Lower pressures help as well. Don't feel like you need to hit 9 bars, even though they've told you that that's what espresso machines are brewing at. It's not the truth, not in most cases. Most espresso machines, there's only a couple that I'm aware of on the market that actually measure right here at the brew head inside the coffee puck. Most of them are measuring somewhere back in the system. And that means the pump is set to say 10 bars and it's reading 9 bars somewhere in here, but by the time it actually gets into your puck, it's probably closer to 8. So I like to brew at about 7, and you can try anything down to 4, 5 bars. But the lower that pressure, the more forgiving it's going to be. You're not going to break open and create these fissures. Going to 9 bars and above can actually start causing issues because, again, 9 bars is probably not what most machines are brewing at. And if they were, they would have more jamming going on where the water's not getting through the coffee bed and it's kind of finding different ways. So I would say drop your pressure a little bit. You'll find that you'll have fewer sprites, that kind of thing's going on. So that's one thing you can do for that. The sour, we rarely hear people tell us the coffee is too bitter because temperature being what it is and thermal management, not everybody's doing what they need to do just yet. It's almost always under extraction or sour, but it's also a good opportunity to make sure that you actually like that coffee as an espresso. If you're like me, you have different brew methods. There's certain coffees I don't make espresso with. There's also certain coffees I don't make coffee with. It's going to be different. So even though you have this, favorite coffee that you've been using as an AeroPress or a Chemex or a V60 or something, you may not like it as espresso. It might be too concentrated, too much of that acidity. Make sure you've tried that espresso on a different machine before you rule out that it's just that coffee as espresso. But if you've found that coffee somewhere else, find out, and you like it, find out maybe you need to get the water that they have to take home with you. Maybe you need to know how many grams in to how many grams out, how long they're pulling it, that kind of thing. Get that information from whoever it is that brewed that tasty cup of espresso for you so you can go home and try to mimic it. But don't rule out the fact that you may not like that coffee as espresso. So get your temperature up, do something like that. You can even, this is the test, the litmus test, I would say, is to take your, it's over here anyways, take it and put it into the bottom of the kettle, put it into a pot of water, and just boil that cylinder for 2 minutes straight at a rapid boil. Pull it out with tongs safely, throw it on, pour in the boiling hot water, and pull that shot. If it's still tasting sour to you, it's not something with the temperature, it's just the coffee. But that's like kind of a litmus test because you're bringing in as much energy as you possibly can. You're close to boiling, so you're going to probably rule out that problem there. It could be puck prep still. Let's see. I think that's no crema. That's the last one. So for some folks, crema is still that thing we like to see. I mean, it's beautiful. It's sexy. But some of us spoon it off and dump it out, don't drink it. Or I like to swirl around my cup and try to get the bubbles to pop and the crema to dissipate. There's carbon dioxide in that. That's pretty much what's holding those bubbles. The surfactants are holding those bubbles there. But it's carbon dioxide, which is kind of an off taste to some people. It can be a little bit more bitter. But if you like crema, it's the CO2 that you need more of. It's probably that your coffee was pre-ground or ground maybe the night before. Maybe you got a whole bag of coffee and you had someone grind it somewhere else. It's off-gassed. It's lost all that CO2. You will find, and we have something on YouTube. If you go onto our YouTube channel, you'll see where we did a test with that same coffee, freshly roasted coffee, ground seconds before the extraction, maybe I think it was 30 minutes before the extraction, and then almost a day before the extraction. And the amount of crema you see is vastly different based on that. So don't use pre-ground coffee. Also, it needs to be freshly ground. Ignore the goodbye dates on bags. Start looking for the best, the roasted on dates. Those are telling you how fresh your coffee is. The rest of it is just marketing. Make sure that you're getting coffee and using it within the first 30 to 45 days. But too fresh a coffee can be a problem too. I'm a home roaster, roast my own coffee, but I don't touch it for the first 7 days. 7 to 10 days is kind of the sweet spot for me. You go into it too soon and there's so much CO2, it's like a volcano or an explosion. It messes with your extraction and it gets crazy. Every shot from shot to shot will be so much different. So a well-rested coffee, but not rested too long, is ideal for this. So do make sure that you're checking that, making sure you're getting fresh coffee if you are interested in crema. It's nothing different than like when you crack open a soda, there's all that fizz and foam and you pour it out and you get this nice head and it dissolves. But if you come back to that cup and you pour it out again, you'll see that it's flat. And that's what coffee's doing. It's off-gassing all the time. All right. I think I've talked enough, at least for now. What I'm going to do is check. I'm going to drink a little bit. I'm going to check the chat, and I'm also going to switch the polls out for anybody that wants to bail out, because that was my presentation. If you want to stick around, there's always good questions that are asked and new answers that you might not have heard of. I've just launched another poll. It's the exit poll. I just want to hear, how was it? Was it too long? Did you like the top-down view? Actually, I don't have that question in there yet, but you can tell me in chat or send me a message. But give me an idea as to how that worked out. We're always trying to restructure this class and give you what you need. Again, it's a big class. We had 16 people today. I can't structure it that it's going to work best for everybody. Try to keep it somewhere in the middle of not too basic, not too advanced. Let me know if we did that well today. Are you going to record this session? We can refer back to it. Absolutely. I'm recording right now, and I'll put that together in a video and upload it to YouTube, and I'll send you the link when that time comes. Let's see. It's being reordered. Let's see. You can see there. Someone's talking. Wearing a mic would be good in the future classes. Oh, is the audio not good? I have a interesting. Yeah, you have to tell me later why that didn't work out, because I thought I had the mic set up. It says I'm using my mic above me. So tell me more about that if you could send me a message and let me know what was wrong with the audio, because I thought it's keyed up well. Use a classic. Too fast equals sour. Too slow equals bitter. Is that right? Yeah, pretty much. You're under extracting if it's going through it too fast. So one other good point to make, if you're looking on the internet for advice as to how long to pull a shot, whatever you read out there, times it by 1.3. We have to grind a little bit coarser with our baskets. They're narrower, which means that same 18 grams or 16 grams sits higher in the basket. It's a taller pile of coffee. If you use the same fine grind that you would, say, in a bigger basket, the commercial baskets where the cafes that you bought it at, they will have that same 18 gram spread in a thinner pile or a less deep. And so they can go a little bit finer. We have to go a little bit coarser. As you go a little bit coarser, you're going to want a little bit extra time for the extraction. So generally speaking, for most grinders, and grinders make a difference here too, but for most grinders, I would say that you want to pull your shots 35 seconds at least, no less, to about 45. So depending on what you're doing, how long the shot is and all the rest, don't pull a shot less than 35. You're probably not going to get a good result. Most people are finding good results in the 40-second range. Also, the pre-infusion is not part of that time. The pre-infusion, whether you use it or not, is a separate time that you can add into the total extraction. So maybe 8 to 10 second pre-infusion and then go to a 35, 40-second pull. Let's see, I used classic, too fast. Top-down view was awesome. Thank you. Can you share some scales? Okay, so this is the cheapest scale that's out there that I'm aware of that is accurate, fits underneath the Flair, has a time feature. That's crucial. Please keep track of your time on your phone or whatever. So it's called the Weightman on Amazon. It's about 20 bucks, 19 bucks, depending on when you buy it. So it's super affordable. It's good down to a tenth of a gram, I think, or maybe 100th, I can't remember. And time and tariff. So that's that. The Lunar from Akaya is a really good one. And this is a Pixis, really tiny little one, only espresso. The Lunar you can use for other brew methods, but these are expensive. These are over 200 bucks, 225. Another one is Barista Smart Scale 2. Those are about $75, $80. So you can try that as well. Those are good. The Brew with Flair group, you can see it right now in the poll. That's a great place to ask these questions and find out. Like, there's all sorts of fun stuff you can buy. This is a distributor. You know, there's other more professional tools than that. You know, you'll learn a lot of things there. You can ask the questions, what scale, what grinder. You know, I want to mention one thing on this. You don't need these. I don't use them. They're fun. It's like if you're you know, it's got to be fun to be kind of like a doctor or a dentist, to have all these special tools while you're doing things. And that's kind of what it feels like. Or if you like to play with tools, it's nice to have other things. But honestly, I don't use these day to day, and I think that they can actually cause problems if you're not using them right. But there are distributors and custom tampers and other things you can purchase, and in that group you'll find all that information. Audio is fun overall to understand you. When you're talking at times, there's an echo, or you're having talk over the sound of the kettle. Well, okay, good point. Maybe I'll work on that in the future. But usually speaking, the audio is a lot better on the recorded version. So if you do want to watch this again, it's good to kind of fast forward it. I like to set it to 1.5 speed or whatever, so I get through it real quick. But the audio is a lot better there than it is coming through Zoom right now. I promise you that. It's pretty crisp. How much pressure to put on pre-infusion? So pre-infusion, the way I call it kind of a pressure test. I like to see what my coffee bed is going to hold before I decide how much pressure to use. So I like to see about 2 bars without drips. Again, go slowly into about 2 bars. And if my puck can hold that for about 4 or 5 seconds, then that tells me that's, for what I'm doing, that's where I want to be. It's generally not going to hold 3 bars unless you grind really fine. And at that point, you got to change things in your extraction. But for me, I'm looking for just between 2 to 3 bars of pressure. And as I start to see the drips come in, as those drips start to increase or accumulate, I stop pre-infusing and move in to the pressure, because for me, I'm extracting at a really low pressure. That's extraction, right? I'm pushing water through the coffee. It's ending up in a cup. They say, it's fair game, a few drips, but as you start to add milliliters, grams to that cup, you're basically under extracting a part of your coffee. So I don't like to pre-infuse where my cup is filling up. So that's why as I start to see the drops come in, then I'll move into pressure. Now, if I see them coming in too fast at 2 bars, that tells me I want to slam the puck down. I want to go a little bit harder down to my full top end pressure, 7, 8 bars, 9 bars, maybe even, because I can slam the puck, compress it more with that pressure, and hopefully slow down where I'm extracting at. Now, conversely, if I don't get any drips and I'm even at 3 bar and nothing's coming through, that tells me if I try to go too fast to pressure, I'll probably not get an extraction. I'll choke it. So then I'll go really slowly into 6, 7 bars. This is pressure profiling. It's advanced. We can talk about that more somewhere else, but these are ways to like save a shot or adapt it. I also mentioned earlier to you that I'm watching my time. I'm watching my weight as I go. I like to see no more than 1 gram per second as so that would be a flow of 1 gram per second. As I'm watching the time go up, if the time's going up faster than the grams, then that means my flow is slower. If my grams are going up faster than my time, my flow is higher. I don't like to pull a shot faster than 1.2 grams per second, 1.3. So if I see it coming out too fast, then I'm going to run that shot a little bit longer. So even if my target was 32, I'll probably pull to maybe 40. I want to run more water through that, get some more extraction out of that. Conversely, if it's going really slow, I don't want to probably sit there and try to get my 32 grams. It's probably going to be too bitter and unpleasant, too much time. So these are all ways that with a manual machine, you'll be able to make some adjustments on the fly. And that's why, using mirrors, paying attention to how fast it's coming out. These are all things that are going to help you to do that. What was the mineral pack? Third wave water. Like I said, you can buy these 1 per gallon of deionized water. Don't use them in regular water. The instructions will tell you. Just a good way to, again, try to get water at what they say is the best for your extraction and see if that makes a difference. The water that you're drinking at home through the Brita or whatever might taste great to you, but you don't really know what's inside it. So it's great that it doesn't have like too much chlorine or fluoride or something else that's off-putting to your palate, but it doesn't mean it's going to make good espresso or good coffee. It's important to know, do a little water test or try that, water. Somebody just told me volcanic. I think volcanic is one of those that is one of the best off the shelf that you can go get and try that as well if you don't want to do that. So there's certain waters, spring waters that are good off the shelf. Crystal Geyser is another one of those that's pretty close, right off the shelf for water. What was the name of the first scale mentioned again? The Waitman. All right, so at this point, guys, I've gone through the chat, pretty much said what I wanted to say. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to unmute. If it's a more complicated question you want to talk it through, you're welcome to do that now. Ask me any questions while you have me. You'll always find us again at Service, Brew with Flair, or DM us through the socials. But if you have any questions you want to ask me before we say goodbye, go ahead and unmute and ask. I'm going to drink a little bit more espresso. Anybody? Nobody? All right. Anybody else? Oh, what was the name of the plastic rubber funnel? These are just generic. Again, 3.5 inches is what you're looking for diameter. If you have a Stag kettle from Fellow, and if you have a Barista or a Bonavita, 3 inches. But anyone's as good as an X as long as they fit your kettle. And even if they're a little bit tight and they raise up a little bit higher, you're okay. Just obviously you want to make sure it doesn't fall through. And if you need a link to one that I know that works, send us a DM later or an email and I can send you that link. But they're pretty much no-name type of things. What's the name of the question? I think I went through all the questions. And we are at about an hour. So again, I'm here for you if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you all. And thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks for joining. Thank you for this great face to the brand. I'm only one of the faces, forward facing, but again, I'm Andrew. There's Abby, there's Virgil. You'll talk to any of us when you send in. There's the inventor, Sergio Landau. We try to keep him busy designing and improving products, so you won't hear from him much. But yeah, there's a team of us. We're a small company, but maybe 12, 13 employees. We're doing our best. Thanks again for trusting us here and giving us the chance to serve you. If you have any questions after the class or you want to get that link, like I said, I'm probably just going to send it out to everybody on the list, and you'll have that recording. And hope to see you in Brew with Flair, guys. Thanks. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.